Welcome to episode 362 of the Community Broadband Bits podcast from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. This is Jess Delfiaco filling in for Lisa Gonzalez. This week, Christopher chats with Matt Rantanen, Director of Technology at the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association and Director of the Tribal Digital Village Network. They discuss Matt's experiences finding creative solutions for better connectivity in Indian country, which often involves working throughout tricky terrain. Matt also talks about how the FCC's impact on tribal communities has changed in recent years, why broadband is continuing to become more and more important on reservations, and some promising new tools that are becoming available. We also get to learn about Matt's newest project, a company called Arcadian Infracom that's working to create diverse fiber paths throughout the U.S., thanks to some innovative partnerships with tribal communities. Now here's Matt and Christopher.
Welcome to another episode of the Community Broadband Bits podcast. I'm Chris Mitchell with the Institute for Local Self-Reliance in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And today I'm talking to my good friend, Matt Rantanen, who, now pace yourself for this, is the Director of Technology of Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association and Director of the Tribal Digital Village Network. Welcome back, Matt.
Hey, good to be here, Chris.
So I'm excited. I know that you have a very interesting project going on in the Southwest that we're going to talk about here in a minute. But first of all, I think just for people who haven't heard of it before, do you want to just very quickly remind us what Tribal Digital Village is?
Sure. The Tribal Digital Village is an initiative that was started with a Hewlett-Packard grant back in 2001 that essentially was designed to bring resource programs to the tribal facilities of the member tribes of Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association, which there are now 20 member tribes. We were 19 at the time, and each of the reservations got some funding and computer equipment to build a resource program or a resource center. If they already had that, it enhanced it so that kids had places to go after school to do homework and study, and community members as well. And the network to the outbound internet was created to support each of those locations. And that network has grown into what we call TDVNet, and TDVNet is now over 650 miles of point-to-point and point-to-multipoint links with 10 gig fiber at the head end and 10 gig fiber at the tail end of the network for redundancy, and about 400 homes and right around 1,500 transient users.
And you've been on top of all kinds of interesting wireless ways to solve this problem, right? I mean, you have the solar-powered antennae in multiple areas. You've been doing stuff in the white spaces with Microsoft, all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah. You know, you get in a situation where you have really diverse geography, really tough to build situations. We have mountaintops and valleys, and it has presented every single obstacle that you could possibly imagine. So we've come up with every single possible solution: duct tape, chicken wire. I mean, you name it, we've put it together. You know, some of the frequencies that are becoming available to us, like white space, EBS, and a few other things. You know, we're starting to play in those realms so that we can expand our footprint. Shoot through some trees, kind of bend around corners, get some of that neater stuff that works a little bit better than line of sight. So we're excited that there's some opportunity there. But yeah, we had to pull some tricks out of our hat, that's for sure, to make this happen. And we have 23 towers, 20 of them running off grid on solar.
Now, remind me, we've talked about this before, but what is the state, not that you are a representative of all of the tribes across the United States, but what is the situation in general on reservations regarding telecommunications services?
It's still pretty dismal. The plain old copper network, the plain old telephone service is still right around 70% penetration. So 30% of the folks that are on a reservation can't dial 911 on the landline. Cellular is starting to creep in a bit, but, there are plenty of places where we could show you no signal. The fun thing is to bring representatives of the FCC out to the reservation and drive them around and look at them struggle to try to figure out how to stay connected with their phones. And as far as broadband technology and penetration in Indian country, projects like the Tribal Digital Village Network, like Red Spectrum in Coeur d'Alene, Yurok and Karuk tribes in Northern California, a handful of tribes are actually putting together networks that are serving their communities, and they're actually getting to the point where they're 100% access, whatever the take rate is, and so they actually have opportunities for their folks to connect. But it is not widespread. There's 573 federally recognized tribes in the U.S., 320 reservations in the lower 48, and we're looking at, fraction of those people that have access to this. There's only 12 tribal telcos as well, so the service area is still small. We're growing, and the shift in the mentality about what broadband is to a tribe and the tribal community, and what the opportunities may lie ahead as far as education and retaining their educated youth as part of their population base. Things have changed. There's been a shift, but we certainly don't have the penetration that we need.
Well, and one of the things that I hope that we'll see is that you'll have more tools, not just you, although frankly, I think I'm always interested to see what happens whenever you get a new tool, because whether it's welding in your shop in your house or building the networks in different areas, you're pretty handy with it. But I was actually going to try and get into this discussion around EBS, the Educational Broadcast Spectrum, if I remember correctly. What is happening there? I mean, you can assume that maybe a number of the listeners have never even heard of EBS before. So what's happening there? What's the potential?
So Educational Broadcast Spectrum, EBS, was designed essentially to be able to connect educational facilities with wireless, and it is in the sweeter spectrum range, the cellular style range. It can be distributed like LTE, and there's a few demonstration projects in Indian country that have been done. One of the leaders in the use of this technology is MuralNet, MURAL net. And the CEO, Mariel Triggs, is a big advocate for connecting tribal communities. She's working on the ground in the Southwest, and then they connected the Havasupai down in the bottom of the Grand Canyon. And that's one of the coolest projects being used for this. Basically, the spectrum is kind of on the chopping block at the moment at the FCC. It's, the comments are open and potentially closed. I don't know the date, but a lot of stuff has been said. The tribal aspect of things, and a lot of people have pushed on the tribal side of things, with all the way up to the chairman of the FCC and the commissioners, that there's a great opportunity for tribes to be able to utilize this spectrum because of the type of spectrum it is, like cellular, and to be able to use it to deploy to their communities. And we're pushing for a tribal priority. The drafts that we've seen of the potential rulemaking are addressing this as a tribal priority. We just don't know to what extent things will change in the 11th hour. But, fingers are crossed, because this is another swath of spectrum. It's a fairly big chunk, and it opens up some doors for some real creative use in Indian country.
What does a tribal priority mean? Like, what would you be able to do with that?
So there's an example of tribal priority with the FM radio spectrum. The tribes, so typically FM radio has a window of opportunity. The window opens, you can apply for a license. You have a competition between, the value of what you're bringing to the table with that license. There's a purchase fee, and then, there's an award given in a region. So with a tribal priority on that component, if the tribe is serving its own tribal land, the tribe gets priority. There is no fee associated with the license, and there is no window of application. The window is always open for the tribal community. We feel that spectrum over tribal lands, though the United States does not identify that as tribal owned, it would make sense that the tribes would have first access to that, because the tribes are typically the carrier of last resort that would serve that community, because the incumbents are not interested in serving a low population density. The lack of ROI just forces them to say that it doesn't make sense to put the infrastructure in. We can't recover the costs at all, but we can from the ground up, and we just need the opportunity and the access to the spectrum. So that's kind of where we're coming from.
I want to ask you a question about the FCC more generally. And I don't recall if we've talked about this in past podcasts, but you and I have certainly talked about it in panels we were on together or things like that. If we go back to the beginning of the Obama administration, a lot of the public interest groups and myself, we really did not like Chairman Janikowski. Thought he got a lot of things wrong. And at the same time, I think, your impression is that he actually did a lot for tribes. And I think I like to bring this up because a lot of people forget that tribes have your own interests. You're not just rural America. There's a lot of different issues. And so I want to get a sense, if you want to just talk briefly about that, and then about this whole larger area that I'm trying to set up. Chairman Wheeler came in the second half of the Obama administration. I liked him. A lot of the public interest groups liked him a lot more. I think he wasn't as good for the tribes. And then Chairman Pai took over under the Trump administration. And I think on the issue of Lifeline, he's been really bad for a lot of the lower income members of tribes and living in tribal areas. So I'm curious how it's been more generally, though, and if you want to just say, a brief overview of your impressions of the FCC over the past 10 years or so.
Sure. So when Janikowski was in place, let's rewind one step. We had Michael Copps in there as an interim chair of the FCC, and that was one of the best things ever. Michael Copps is one of the biggest champions of Indian country, and I think moving into Janikowski being the chair, I think a lot of that sentiment from Copps moved forward with Janikowski on the tribal front, and he was there as an advocate internal for a little bit of that time. Obviously, the Obama administration was geared towards helping tribal communities on some level, and so there wasn't opposition to helping tribes. I think the real catalyst that caused us to be able to move under Janikowski was the fact that we started the Office of Native Affairs and Policy at the FCC during that time. Jeffrey Blackwell was named chief of that office, and several of the intertribal organizations and tribal leaderships groups that are in the U.S. Endorsed Jeffrey Blackwell to be that position, and he was placed in that position. And we had a very strong advocate inside the FCC who was pushing internal for tribal issues, started the Native Nations Broadband Task Force, of which I served 2 terms under Janikowski, and then I was reaffirmed under Wheeler, and we were able to move the needle quite dramatically during those times. The shift, essentially Janikowski, in my mind, was like, okay, if I can do it, push everything at me, I'll push back on the things I can't do. And so we pushed everything we could push at Janikowski, and we got 11 out of 12. It was that kind of a win. Wheeler came in a little bit different, coming from the cable industry and the wireless industry, and being in the Hall of Fame for both. I think he had a little bit different take on things. He was a little bit more calculating. We had very good meetings on the 8th floor with him through the National Congress of American Indians, and he was engaged. He wanted to be supportive, but at the same time, he was playing his role as he saw it. And I think we got less done under Wheeler. And I think what happened with Wheeler and then transitioned into Chairman Pai with Lifeline, I think actually it started its genesis with Wheeler and maybe was influenced by Wheeler, and then Chairman Pai was the one that executed on that. And it's unfortunate because that has been very damaging to Indian country. As we saw in court, that decision was overturned, specifically in the tribal areas that were in question. And, the impact to the tribal people was massive. So currently under this administration, though tribes are not a priority as...
So Matt, quickly, I think a reminder, and let me know if I'm getting this right, because you and I have talked about this before, but the issue that has been raised regarding Lifeline is that there are a number of companies that are basically trying to scam the federal government to get these subsidies. And so they go and they basically prey on low-income populations that live in Indian country. And the response from the FCC, and particularly under Chairman Pai, has been to say, well, let's just not give any money to Indian country effectively to try and like harm the scammers, but also having this an effect of taking phones away from, I don't know how many people, but lots of people who really need them.
Yeah, so it gets even worse than that. So essentially what he's done, Chairman Pai has done with Lifeline in his, thought process on how to solve the waste, fraud, and abuse, is to carve out on the map areas where he feels the waste, fraud, and abuse is the heaviest. So if you're going to be looking for a kickback from the federal government and you're going to scam the federal government, you're going to look for the biggest kickback, biggest bang for your buck. Well, Tribal Community Lifeline gets a bigger discount and a bigger payback rate from the FCC than a normal Lifeline customer off of reservation or off of tribal lands, because the opportunity on tribal lands is far harder to connect people than it is in non-tribal lands. So obviously they're preying on the biggest dollar that they can recover from the FCC. And so we've seen actual pickup trucks full of phones drive into fiestas and powwows and actually hand them out off the back of a truck. We've actually witnessed them asking, okay, what's your name? And then, the husband comes up and says the name and then signs up for the phone. And then the wife is standing there. And then, the tribes don't exactly understand the rulemakings on how this is actually supposed to be distributed. And then they say, what's your name? And she explains her name is the same last name in the same household. And then what they do is they tweak the spelling of the last name and hand the phone to the woman. And then there's let's say there's a 17-year-old child in the house that's with the group at the time. Then they will ask the name of that person and they will tweak that last name, or they'll tweak the address to cook the database. And it's super frustrating to see that happen. So basically by redrawing the line on the map, he is effectively saying that he has the ability to change sovereign right? Sovereign territory. Those lines on the map are there for a reason. We're sovereign dependents of the United States federal government. He's saying that he can redefine that area and pull services from that when he really doesn't have the right to do that. And I think that's why it got hung up in court.
So I want to get back then to the overall impressions, aside from just Lifeline, but any sense of how priorities around the needs in Indian country have changed under the Trump administration?
So interestingly enough, I don't know that we are in favor at the moment with this administration, but we
Welcome
have the
to opportunity.
The club. Yeah, we have the opportunity, however, to adapt, right? So we see opportunity, even though there is, a different playing field and a different set of players, with some of the announcements and some of the focus that's happened, and we think to gain more voters that are aligned with this administration. The administration is looking to serve broadband to rural customers throughout the United States. They're very focused on rural connectivity, and those rural voters are typically farther to the right on the spectrum of politics than to the left. And so that would increase the voter base and service to the voter base that I think aligns with the administration, which, be it what it is, we have the opportunity to convert that into opportunity for rural connectivity, and tribes are mostly 90-some% rural, and we can take advantage of some of those opportunities that are coming out, and we can even actually get funding and things through like the RUS program with the Reconnect and different things to be able to bring rural broadband out, as long as we bring that broadband out with a focus on the region instead of just a micro focus on the tribe.
This is a great opportunity then to talk about your next project, because you're not busy enough. You don't travel enough. You're working on partnering and business development for something called Arcadian Infracom. What is the deal with that?
So about a year and a half to almost 2 years ago now, we meaning the original 4 or 5 people from Arcadian Infracom, got together around a meeting at PTC, Pacific Telecom Conference. A couple of problems presented themselves to the group on a couple of individual pathways, and like minds together trying to solve the same thing. It was one of those epiphany moments when, the co-founders of Arcadian Infracom, Dan Davis and Derek Garnier, thought, oh, what if we do this? And then the other one was like, yeah, if we did that, we could do this. And then all of a sudden this spawned a broadband, so fiber infrastructure building company, not a service provider, but an actual dark fiber builder that is serving the top tier customers, that being, the Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and as the top tier customers, connecting their data centers through new, and then quotes around that, new routes through the United States to be able to create diversity in the fiber paths that don't exist today. Everybody seems to be building on the same rights of way, and it presents a real security risk for the infrastructure as well as just a risk in failure to build in the same rights of way and not have a more diverse fiber structure of the United States or fiber map of the United States. So one of the things that happened...
It's not like we're seeing unprecedented hurricanes, fires, and other forms of flooding and natural disaster. I don't know why you would be worried about that, Matt.
Yeah, global warming, what's that? Yeah, I could talk about that all day long with Tribal Digital Village and solar panels. Oddly enough, we get way more clouds than we ever have in the last 19 years. I've been here for 19 years, and I've seen 3 to 5 days in storms on average in the beginning. We are now 7 to 10 days in the clouds without solar recovery. So, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. However,
brutal. Yeah, go ahead.
This diversity in the fiber path build creates opportunity for a bunch of reasons. So these over-the-top hyperscalers, whatever you want to call that top-tier customer level, is driving the fiber map, is driving the build map in the United States today and globally. It's not the carriers anymore. The carriers are more reactive than anything. They're picking up, fiber assets on routes that are being built, but they are no longer capital heavy where they can actually go out and build new infrastructure, greenfield infrastructure. So a company like Arcadian Infracom is timed perfectly to be able to support these top tier customers, and that is the business model. However, we have a freedom in design of that route. We have the ability to draw a new line through the map. We all know that 20 years ago, when all 7 of the networks that were built across the United States built and valued on route miles built in a day, how valuable is that company? I don't know how many miles have they built. Well, that kind of a race across the country with fiber build really dictated how that fiber was going to be laid. It was avoiding every pitfall, every geographic obstacle, every tribal reservation, because they did not have the time to negotiate an easement or a right-of-way on each of the reservations of the 320 land masses they had to get around to get across the country. They created this map on the United States where there's these giant holes in the fiber. There's no opportunity. So these new lines that Arcadian Infracom are drawing between these data centers for these high-value customers, they have to be from A to B with a certain amount of latency. Well, within that latency, there's a lot of leeway on where that route lays on the ground.
So if, for instance, there's, of Amazon and Facebook, for me to pick out 2 companies, they may have data centers in like parts of Colorado or New Mexico, and you're basically going to get fiber between the 2 of them. But in the course of how you do it, you can figure out whether you want to connect pueblos or other reservations, or if you wanted to avoid them, which obviously in this case you wouldn't want to do.
Sure. So our CEO, Dan Davis, essentially built, bought, and acquired fiber for CenturyLink for the last, 15 years. And so he is self-aware that he was part of that problem in consolidating all those fiber companies into one. And in the process, in his original build, when he built one of those networks across the country, that he was very aware of avoiding those pitfalls. He is now doing penance, if you will. We're holding him to the grindstone. He is going to lead this charge by dragging that fiber path through Little Town, USA, zigzagging it back and forth to catch every reservation, every opportunity that the region needs, the rural region needs, and leaving connectivity opportunities at the doorstep. So one of the things I did in the Obama administration was work with a CTO of the United States to identify a solution for tribes and why they don't have access to fiber. Well, it was a mapping project. We worked with all the carriers. We overlaid, maps under a non-disclosure agreement over the reservation boundaries. We did some mapping work. There are 8,000 middle mile fiber miles missing from the map to be able to connect to reservations. So just to get middle mile fiber to a key location on each of the reservations in the lower 48, 320, that's how many fiber miles are missing, 8,000 miles. So this kind of a build drags that fiber path and presents opportunity and connectivity at very affordable rates at the doorstep of each of these locations, Little Town, USA, tribes, pueblos, you name it, across that landscape. And with our partners and other small carriers, they will be able to build out those regions.
That's pretty great. Is there like a first project that you can talk about, or is this something that's not public yet?
No, so there's an announced route. It's on the website. So we did a little play with the dot and the .com. So it's arcadianinfra.com, ARCADIANINFRA.com. If you go there, you can scroll down and you can see the map. There's a solid line on the map that looks like a Y. It goes from Phoenix through Cameron, Arizona, to Salt Lake City, and from Phoenix to Cameron, Arizona, to Denver, Colorado. That Y creates a convergence path intentionally on the Navajo reservation. One of the things that happened and that is actually happening this year is the coal-burning power generation station that's on the Navajo reservation is shutting down. It is a massive percentage of the tribal income annually. It is approximately 3,000 jobs, and it shifts the landscape on the reservation, and they're definitely trying to figure out how to solve that. Well, by converging 3 fiber paths on the reservation at that location in Cameron has access to multiple water sources. The utility company of the tribe has access to that. There are multiple power providers that are in that region that can provide redundant power source, and the fiber build from Arcadian would provide diverse routes in and out of that potential data center location. So a data center build is imminent on the Navajo reservation. We can't pick up 3,000 jobs with that, but there will be a lot of workforce needed throughout the phases of the build of that and then the maintenance of that moving forward. Not to mention, it just creates a lot of opportunity on the reservation. So that's the first announced route. There is a route that has a dotted line that goes east and west off of that route. It supports Los Angeles, essentially through Flagstaff, running on the I-40 to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then through to Dallas. That east-west route is in the works, and we're comfortable putting it on the page because we've had conversations with each of the states involved, a lot of the key stakeholders involved, and it will be the next route. And it's very exciting because it will do things like connect all of the Southwest universities to capacity for their supercomputer centers. It will do things like bring data center traffic for some of our customers east-west at a capacity that they don't currently have to that region. It connects, oddly, like Dallas to Salt Lake, which isn't really a direct path currently. You don't have to go around the Navajo reservation anymore. You can go through the Navajo reservation, where before you used to have to go sometimes from Salt Lake City to Los Angeles to Phoenix, or from Denver to El Paso to Phoenix. Now you can go Denver to Phoenix. That's a huge shift. It also changes the landscape on where people are placing data centers and, growing opportunities moving forward.
Right. Well, I remember that one of the challenges you had. I mean, I can't imagine with how much satisfaction it is that you can talk about having a 10 gig link on both sides of your network now, because there was a time when there was no off ramps, right? You had fiber nearby, but you couldn't touch it.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Indian country has that problem, right, with the 8,000 missing miles. Well, we identified a fiber opportunity close to the TDV network, and I could not, for the life of me, for at least 6 years, break into that fiber. I could not get the fiber. And then when I could finally get access to the people that would finally sell me the fiber, $17 a meg per month, which you cannot afford to do at scale. And so, it was a relationship with a state CIO. It was a public announcement of tribal aligned with government. It was them getting me in the door to the right negotiation people. Well, with Arcadian Infocom, I'm with a group of people that understands that level, right? So I'm in the door doing business development, helping do this. So Arcadian worked a year in secret with the Navajo Nation to be able to go across that reservation. The Navajo Nation has been advertising for decades, $1 million a mile easement. If you want to ride away across their land, 27,000 square miles or something crazy, it was $1 million a mile, linear mile. And it was basically a sign on the outside of the reservation that said, go away, we don't want to deal with you anymore, because they've been mistreated for so long. Well, they actually came to us about how to solve the problem with the closing down of the power generation station and what could they do with it. And they were thinking data center, and data center makes a lot of sense. The problem is data center without fiber is a warehouse, a rather hot warehouse. So the real solution to the problem is a fiber path through the reservation, and the tribe is benefiting greatly from the relationship and the easement. They're actually getting dark fiber. They're getting lit services, 400 gig lit services on reservation, and they're getting revenue share off the top. So it's a great opportunity. It's a great relationship, and we're changing the landscape for future fiber builds from other companies to work more closely with the tribe as a partner rather than just an obstacle.
Great. Well, I've really appreciated this discussion to get a better sense of what's going on and that there's progress. It's really great seeing that there's so many more opportunities on the horizon.
Yeah, I mean, there needs to be many more, obviously, but, this is a big start. We hopefully will shift the landscape a little bit with the way that we've done this deal. And as this starts to gain momentum and more builds come online, we think we can, make a difference. And that's what we're here to do. We're trying to help solve that rural connectivity problem. And America's got a lot of talented people that live outside the city centers, and they just don't have access to the resources they need. And a lot of those people are on reservations, so it's really important to get those people connected.
Great. Thank you, Matt.
No problem, Chris. Good to talk to you.
That was Christopher and Matt Rantanen discussing connectivity in tribal communities. We have transcripts for this and other podcasts available at muninetworks.org/broadbandbits. Email us at podcast@muninetworks.org with your ideas for the show. Follow Chris on Twitter. His handle is @CommunityNets. Follow muninetworks.org stories on Twitter. The handle is @muninetworks. Subscribe to this podcast and the other podcasts from ILSR, Building Local Power, and the Local Energy Rules podcast. You can access them wherever you get your podcasts. You can catch the latest important research from all of our initiatives if you subscribe to our monthly newsletter at ilsr.org. While you're there, please take a moment to donate. Your support in any amount keeps us going. Thank you to Arnie Huseby for the song Warm Duck Shuffle, licensed through Creative Commons. Thank you for listening to episode 362 of the Community Broadband Bits podcast.